But first, as the energy network clings on by a thread, Chris Bowen has sparked outrage by claiming coal is the biggest threat to reliability. Bowen is an unfortunate energy minister. He was a disaster in the Treasury portfolio. He proposed so many controversial taxes that he all but lost Bill Shorten the unlosable election. Now he's a disaster as energy minister, and we're all suffering. Chris Bowen has blamed the fact that there was not enough coal-fired power stations operating yesterday for the perilous supply.
The biggest threat to reliability in our energy system is coal-fired power stations.
Well, I'd say the biggest threat to reliability in our energy system isn't coal-fired power stations, it's this bloke, Chris Bowen. Let's just reiterate that crucial point again. There was a real risk of blackouts in New South Wales yesterday, and Chris Bowen has blamed the fact that there was not enough coal in the system for this. Not enough coal. When Bowen has spent every waking moment trying to get coal out of Australia's energy system. And now he blames the fact there wasn't enough of it. And so we had this energy crisis. Well, this is what all the experts have been warning about. Rushing the transition to renewables. Shutting down coal-fired power stations when there's not enough storage capacity or alternative baseload power like gas. And thus being left without enough power to run businesses, hospitals and households. The utter audacity of the guy. Here he was this morning with Laura Jays blaming the shortage of coal for the fact we risked blackouts yesterday.
And we are building the transmission and the storage and backed by gas peaking when necessary to ensure a reliable system. But here's the thing. The least reliable part of our energy grid at the moment is coal-fired power. That's just a statement of fact.
Well, the breakdowns are happening because there's been zero investment to extend their life cycle, zero investment in ensuring their ongoing capability. Yes, there were coal-fired power failures yesterday that were partly behind the crisis, which shows just how crucial coal-fired power is to our energy grid, how the very operation of our country, whether we like it or not, relies at the moment on coal-fired power. Bowen and the ideologues like him have refused to invest in the infrastructure to keep coal up and running for longer. They've rushed and encouraged the closure of coal-fired power stations. Now, of course, we'd all love to be in an ideal world where we'd have solely renewable energy that has no carbon impact, but we're far from that scenario and we have to be realistic about it. So Chris Bowen rushes the closure of coal-fired power stations and then wonders why we don't have enough power to keep the lights on. Now, one of the first things that New South Wales Premier Chris Minns did when he won office was to extend the life cycle of the Eraring power station. And here he was explaining a decision that the coalition had opposed in October.
We've been very clear, however, that there's a very narrow path for us to walk to transition from coal-fired power energy generation in the state to renewable energy. That's one of the reasons why we made a decision to keep the Eraring power station open for longer, so that we could have a little bit of buffer to get the Central West Arana renewable energy program up and running, as well as all of our other projects in the state. We don't want to see we don't want to see lights go off. We don't want to see prices increase off their already high peaks.
Now, extending the life cycle of the Eraring coal-fired power station was a move that former Liberal Treasurer and Energy Minister Matt Keane was against. And now Matt Keane is Chris Bowen's partner in crime at the Climate Change Authority. But the worst part is this. We've had this near breakdown this week and we're not even in a severe heat wave. It's normal in summer to have hot days. It's hardly a newsflash to say Australia is hot in summer. It's part of the appeal of our country. And we're just 3 days away from summer. This sort of warm weather is precisely what governments and so-called energy experts should expect. It's the very nature of our Aussie climate. It shouldn't come as a surprise and then lead to a moment of crisis where everyone is told to turn off their dishwashers and their lights. Well, one of the issues with this government is that Chris Bowen is both the Environment and the Energy Minister, two portfolios that are a contradiction in terms. As Energy Minister, his focus should be keeping the lights on, but instead his task is corrupted by putting environmental priorities above the operation of our country. This means a rushed transition to renewables before the infrastructure is in place. As AEMO has warned, the risk of blackouts is now high over summer. One expert, economist Paul Broad, who is the former boss of the Snowy Hydro project, he told the Daily Telegraph, and I'm quoting now, "We've had some really mild summers over the past 3 or 4 years. It's hidden the precarious position that our energy sector has got itself into. It's a reflection on some of the really ill-considered policies and the rush to close our baseload power plants." He is absolutely spot on. And that article is titled "Mass Blackouts Feared as Australia's Third World Power Grid Buckles Under Weight of a Raging Summer." Now, this all has serious political consequences because not only are we facing blackouts, but we're paying more for the privilege of having power outages. It's pretty extraordinary for governments to tell families to turn off their air conditioner and not run their appliances in a first world country, and at the same time as power bills are at record highs. Now, putting aside the energy rebates, Peter Dutton is arguing that after 2.5 years of the Albanese government, power prices are up 31%. No voter could possibly forget that when Anthony Albanese was desperate to become Prime Minister, he promised over and over again that electricity bills would be $275 cheaper.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
$275 a year.
The promise was made 97 times before the last election. 97 times. Now, ahead of the next federal election, Peter Dutton will campaign that this is a major broken promise. And that political tactic featured in Question Time today.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Next week marks 3 years since the now Minister first promised Australians their electricity bills will be reduced by $275 if they voted Labor. Earlier today, in a train wreck interview with Sky's Laura Jays, the Minister refused to admit Labor has broken this promise, saying he was, quote, not walking away from that policy. When will the Minister finally be straight with the Australian people and admit Labor's $275 bill cut promise has been broken?
Now, Chris Bowen already lost to Bill Shorten the 2019 election. It was billed as the unlosable election, with his radical raft of high-taxing policies. And now Chris Bowen could very well help Albanese lose the next election, as more Australians question the lunacy of rushing a transition before the energy system is ready, leaving us vulnerable to blackouts while paying massive energy bills. The Australian Simon Benson reports that community support for the energy transition has fallen by double digits in the past couple of months. Benson writes, for Albanese, Bowen will become more of a political liability the longer he is given rein to peddle language that is completely inaccessible to consumers whose priority has become price and reliability. Now, all of this is only going to shift support for Peter Dutton's nuclear energy plan. His nuclear proposal initially seemed highly controversial and politically risky, but now it's looking like it could turn out to be a vote winner, a solution to the energy madness we find ourselves in.